All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the final webinar in the Supporting Students During COVID-19 series. Tonight, our webinar will focus on building resilience, healthy coping skills. My name is Sarah Underdahl. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker, and I work as a therapist with the Scott County Mental Health Center in the Connect program. Specifically, I work in the Prior Lake and Savage School District, as well as the Jordan School District. If you don't know about the Connect program is a partnership between the Scott County Mental Health Center and most Scott County schools. And typically, it would have a therapist within the school during the school day for your child to be able to meet with and have therapy sessions at school. Right now, those services are taking place primarily virtually. My contact information is on this slide as well, so if you have any questions after the presentation, feel free to reach out to me there. I've also gotten some questions about getting CEUs, if your profession is kind of in this scope, and that's absolutely something I can do as well, so feel free to reach out to me if you have a question about that or are looking for those CEUs. So a few things to know before we get started. As you entered the room, your mic was muted just to make sure that we're not picking up any background noise, but you should be able to unmute yourself to ask questions. So if at any time during the presentation you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. You can also ask questions by typing into the chat box. So either way works. Just know that with the chat box, it will likely default to send to all participants. So if it's something that's more private that you don't want to share with the group, I recommend emailing that question to me just so that I know that it's not a question that you want answered for the group. And then, as I said, if we don't have time to address all the questions that are asked, or if you think of other questions after the presentation, I'm definitely open to asking or answering questions that you email. So tonight we'll be talking about resilience, specifically what it is and how does it develop, building resilience, how we can build resilience over time, areas of self-care practices, and how to get more support. So what is resilience? You might hear kind of that term often, or talking about how someone is really resilient. But what does it mean, and how does someone become a resilient person? So resilience is something that helps us to get through and overcome hardship. So even if someone has maybe experienced a lot of difficulties, had a lot of stressors, they're able to get through it. With children, that they're able to get through difficulties without kind of getting off their developmental track. With resilience, it's actually something, it's not just something that we're born with, but it actually is a mix of experiences that we have during our life, as well as genetics. And so this is why individuals display a really large range of responses. Stress is because people have lots of different levels of resilience, and even people that go through the same experience might have very different outcomes or different kind of reactions to that experience because of the different levels of resilience that they have. So this is a visual that I like. It's from the Center on the Developing Child, and it is a visual that kind of talks about resilience as this scale. And so thinking about someone might have some different negative experiences like this. So this visual is specifically kind of for COVID times, but things like job loss, physical distancing, they might have a loved one with COVID, schools are closed, they're feeling some extra stress. So on the one side, there's the stressors or the adversity or difficulties that people experience. And then trying to counteract those things on the other side are things like protective and coping skills. So in this example, things like maybe someone is unemployed, but they're able to get unemployment, or they have really responsive relationships that are able to support them during this time, or they have really stable housing during this. What are the things that can help to counteract those negative things that someone is experiencing? So kind of going back to that scale visual, think about the scale. Research has identified a common set of factors that can help for adversity and stress. So thinking about that positive side of the scale, what are some things that might fall on that positive side of the scale that can help someone to develop get difficult times? So those things include supportive adult-child relationships, and that can be with a parent or caregiver, or it can be other important adults in the child's life. Also helping children build a sense of self-efficacy and perceived control over situations. Providing opportunities to strengthen adaptive skills and self-regulatory capacity. And engaging in sources of faith, hope, and cultural traditions. And what research shows is that the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. So what this means is that you just being there consistently and supportively for your child makes a huge impact on how they're able to cope with stressors and adversity. So like I said, resilience, it is partially something that we're born with, but also something that can be built up over time. There's the largest impact with experiences when someone is young, but it can be strengthened at any age. So what research says that are things that help people to develop resilience over time are by learning to cope with manageable threats. So essentially practicing coping with positive stress. So for kids, it might be things like trying out for a team and that's stressful for them, or trying a new skill, or taking and working through that kind of positive stress. It essentially is, it's kind of like making that muscle, that resilience muscle, like stronger over time because they're practicing getting through difficult things. Specifically, children that are supported during that and have an adult model to help them see how they can manage their stress during that time. Another thing that research says is age-appropriate health-promoting activities can also help to develop resilience. So these are things like regular physical exercise, stress reduction practices, programs that build executive function and self-regulation skills. And again, adults are such an important part of developing resilience in kids because adults can model these skills for children. They can model these self-care skills. They can model things like coping strategies and stress reduction strategies and encourage children to engage in those to help them to develop this resilience and these skills. So other ways that resilience can be built in children, and again, a lot of these things involve adults and adults modeling these things or helping children to practice these things. So things like modeling self-compassion. When you make a mistake at home, modeling like it's okay to make a mistake. I don't have to be perfect. Now, how do I come back from that? And how do I cope with this? You might kind of engage in out loud, like positive self-talk, or just saying like, oh, it's okay to make a mistake. Maybe if you burned dinner or like added a wrong ingredient or something, those are really good opportunities to model for kids what it looks like when we make a mistake and how we can practice resilience during that time. Also modeling different ways to release emotions. So for kids, if they are feeling really angry and you're noticing this or really sad, maybe offering them different kinds of suggestions of how they can cope with those feelings. If you are experiencing big emotions, it's okay for your child to know that, you're not a robot, that you aren't always calm, that you're going to experience emotions as well. But seeing how you cope with those feelings really helps them to know how they can cope with those same emotions. You might offer, like for a young child, you might kind of model for them like different types of breathing strategies. Or for an older child, maybe you really enjoy going on runs together. You might offer that as something that they can do, but really just openly kind of modeling how you can release emotions, talking about feelings, and modeling those healthy skills for them. Being really realistic and honest about, especially right now when there's so many things going on in the world, there's maybe lots of things that you don't know, and know that that's okay. And so being honest and factual, age appropriately, of course, about the things that you know when they're asking questions. But if they ask a question that you don't know, it's okay to say, I'm not sure, let's figure this out together. Or maybe we don't know that answer right now and it feels hard not to know that. So again, just that modeling. Practicing showing gratitude during these times. It might sometimes feel hard to find the things that you feel grateful for, but modeling that for your child or encouraging your child to express the things that they feel grateful for and are thankful for. And then continuing to seek connection during this time. So again, modeling that for your child. You're still seeking out connection, seeking connection with them, spending quality time together, as well as encouraging them to seek connection in different ways. So maybe they are spending more time with their friends online, or they are seeing friends outside, and you're modeling that for them as well. So as I said, with resilience, part of that is practicing stress reduction techniques, and part of that is self-care. And so with self-care, there is this misconception a lot of times that self-care is this thing that I do when I'm feeling really overwhelmed, and I stop and I do this self-care thing, like take a bath, and it helps me to be present again. But what it actually is something that you do regularly as part of your routine that helps to keep you remaining present and capable of completing the tasks that you need to. So really trying to make self-care something that's proactive rather than just something that we're doing when we feel really overwhelmed. So with self-care, especially if this is something that feels new to you, or maybe just that you haven't made as much time for in the past, really just trying to start small. So look for what are the activities that really sustain and refuel you, and notice that, because it's going to be different for everyone. So for some people, like going on a run might be a great form of self-care, but for other people, that might not really refuel them. It might even deplete their energy more. So really just being mindful about what is going to be helpful for you, and then actively plan those things into your routine. You also might consider adding different activities to your calendar so that you have a plan of when to complete them. You might announce your plans to other people to help increase that commitment. And you might look for opportunities to practice self-care, like taking different classes, even if right now it's online, again, to help with that accountability and have that support of others. Also, just being really conscious as you're practicing these things. So being really aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it feels, and what the outcomes are. Because that's really how you're going to notice the self-care tasks that are most helpful and beneficial to you. So when we think about self-care, we often think about it in kind of 6 different areas. And so those 6 areas are physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional. And these areas can overlap, but they're just kind of broken out into these areas so that we're really thinking about self-care in more of a holistic way. So the first area is physical. Part of this is the things that we do to take care of our bodies, to like things like getting sleep at night, so 7 to 8 hours per night, having a good sleep routine so that that's possible, healthy eating, exercise in whatever way feels good for you, or movement. It can be kind of those things that we maybe think of more typically when we think of self-care, like massage and acupuncture and taking relaxing baths. But it's also things like following up with medical care. A lot of times when we're really stressed, things like checkups annually are kind of things that get pushed aside sometimes. And so really trying to be mindful about continuing to follow up with that medical care, even when you're under stress. Psychological self-care is things like journaling, self-reflection, going to therapy, drawing or painting if you really respond to art and that's a way that you express yourself. Can also be creating a no list. And so these are things that you know that you don't like or that you no longer want to do, and you have some choice of whether or not you engage in them. So things like not checking emails at night. I think that this is something that's more challenging now, kind of that work-home separation with lots of people working from home. It might be harder to kind of end your day and leave that work at work. And so you might make a list of, part of my no list is that I'm not going to check emails at night. Other things on your no list might be things like not answering your phone during lunch or dinner, or not attending gatherings that you haven't enjoyed in the past. Emotional self-care is things like affirmations, positive self-statements, kind of that positive self-talk, self-compassion, so just practicing being really kind to yourself, talking to yourself like you would talk to a friend, laughing, crying, expressing and releasing those emotions. You might watch a funny movie or watch a sad movie to help yourself process and release feelings. So when we think about emotions, we really want to think of emotions as a messenger. And so emotions are trying to tell us something. And you can think about this for yourself, or you can think about it for your child. So if your child is displaying anger, maybe it's because they're feeling like they need to be heard. Or fear, maybe they feel like they need to feel safe. Sadness might indicate that they're needing to feel noticed, or needing to notice the things that they value. Maybe you haven't been kind of practicing and living out your values, and so you're experiencing some sadness about that. And so really values and trying to honor those things. And joy the need might be just that we want to share that joy with others. And so when you experience an emotion, or you're noticing that your child is experiencing a big emotion, just really trying to think about it as a message and what is that emotion trying to tell me? RAIN is a way that we think about radical compassion. And so the R is for recognizing what's going on. The A is for allowing the experience to be there just as it is. I, investigate with care and interest. And N, nurture with self-compassion. So with this acronym, it can be useful to use when you might be experiencing a strong emotion about something. So maybe you're noticing that you're feeling really angry about something that happened. And so first, just notice that anger in yourself, recognize it, and allow it to be there. Don't try to fight against it, but just allowing that anger to be there just as it is. You might even say to yourself, I'm angry right now, and that's okay, or I acknowledge that. And then try to kind of investigate maybe what's underneath that. Like, what is that emotion trying to tell you? And then once we know what that emotion is trying to tell us, really just trying to nurture that with self-compassion. You might use positive self-talk. Sometimes when it feels difficult to be compassionate with ourselves, that can be helpful to think about, what would I say to a friend that was experiencing this? Or what would a friend say to me? Next is spiritual self-care. So with the spiritual area of self-care, this is really about connecting with how and where you find meaning in life. So things like engaging or finding a spiritual community to connect with. You might find meaning through meditation or spending time in nature. You could even find meaning in meaningful relationships for you. So again, this is really just unique to the individual, but wherever you find meaning and connect with that. Personal self-care, this area is all about relationships with partners, with family, with friends. It's also about goal setting. And so for some people, doing things like making a vision board is helpful for them to visualize their goals. For others, just writing it down or sharing it with other people. But those things that are really just for you. And then professional. And like I was saying, I think that this is an area that is maybe more difficult sometimes now with lots of people working from home. It can be more difficult to kind of get that separation during this time. So with professional self-care, that's things like making sure that you're actually taking a lunch break. You're not sitting at your desk, but maybe when it's nicer outside, you're actually going outside to take lunch. Or if you're working from home, maybe you're just going to a different room than you typically work in. You're not bringing a laptop and you're taking time away from the screen just to have that break in the middle of your day. It's also things like asking for support from supervisors or colleagues when you're feeling really overwhelmed, as well as making time for other hobbies or interests, relationships outside of work. So really prioritizing during your free time, what are other things that you're interested in outside of work, and being really intentional about engaging in those things. Other strategies that you can try are things like deep breathing, belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. There's lots of different kind of terms for the same thing. But essentially, this is just taking a deep breath, but being really mindful that the breath is going all the way down to your diaphragm, which is kind of in like your stomach area. That's why we sometimes call it belly breathing. And so to do this diaphragmatic breathing, as you breathe in, you want your stomach to get bigger, or like if your hands are on your stomach, you should feel your hands rise. And then as you breathe out, your hands would go back down to really get a full deep breath in your body. Other things that can be helpful, body scans or progressive muscle relaxation. This is something I think can be really helpful for people like around bedtime if you have a really hard time relaxing. There's lots of different kind of videos and scripts for how to do this online, but essentially you're tensing up different muscles in your body kind of one at a time. So kind of going, a lot of times you'll start at your feet and then kind of move your way up, but you're tensing like your feet and then you're holding that for a few seconds and then releasing to really try to get rid of any tension that you're holding in your muscles. And it can really create a nice awareness of where you typically hold tension in your body because those areas feel relaxed afterwards. Other things that you can try are things like visualization and meditation. Again, there's lots of different resources for these online. Different visualizations might be of like a safe place or a peaceful place for you. And then grounding is something that I think is helpful, especially when maybe you're feeling really preoccupied by anxious thoughts or having difficult memories. This can help to ground you in the present moment. So I like doing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but it doesn't need to be that way. There's really not a right or wrong way to do grounding. It's really just about using your senses to ground you in the present moment. So naming for yourself something you see, something you feel, something you hear, smell, and taste. Or you can do like it says on the slide, like 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste. But again, this is really just for helping us to feel grounded in the present moment, especially when we're feeling really distracted. Here's another visual that I like. It's probably been in a few of these presentations at this point, but it's lots of different ways to take a break. So lots of what we already talked about is on here, but some additional ones are things like engaging in small acts of kindness, taking a walk outside, noticing your body, calling a friend. So lots of different ideas on there of how you can practice self-care, how you can take a break. So this is another visual that I like because it talks about kind of different happiness hormones and things that can help to increase these things in our body. So with dopamine, this is known as the reward chemical, and things like completing a task, like checking something off of our to-do list, eating food that we enjoy, celebrating little wins. Those are all things that can help to increase dopamine in our body. Oxytocin is the love hormone, so things like playing with a dog, listening to music, doing something nice for someone, giving a compliment. Serotonin is known as the mood stabilizer, so things that enhance this are things like meditating, running, going outside and getting some time in the sun, walking in nature, swimming, cycling, kind of those like exercise things. And then endorphins is the painkiller. And so watching a funny movie, eating dark chocolate, exercising. So here are lots of other ideas of kind of self-care things, but more specifically linked to kind of what hormones that can help to promote in your body. This is a visual that the Minnesota Department of Health came out with, and a lot of these things we've already talked about, but I'll just highlight, I like number one, especially during this time, there is a lot of things that we can't control. And so really trying to focus on what are the things that I can control. I know that I can control my own thoughts and my own behavior, but I can't control other people's thoughts and other people's behavior. So really trying to focus on what is in that circle of your own control. 14, reflecting on your reactions. For some people that have had trauma or difficult experiences in their past, this time of might cause them to kind of feel some of those same emotions that they had when they experienced that trauma or that difficult event. And so if you're noticing that maybe you're having a really hard time right now, reflecting on that and just trying to understand how you're feeling and being just more aware that maybe this past experience has a connection to how you're feeling now, or identifying some of those triggers can help you be more in control of how you respond. And then limiting exposure to the news or social media. If you are on social media a lot or engaging in a lot of news content, you might feel really overwhelmed by just the amount of information that's out there. And so it's okay to set some limits and boundaries with yourself around maybe I'm only going to get news from this one source, or I'm going to take a break from social media, or I'm only going to engage in social media for an hour each day. So really just being mindful about how that's impacting you as well. In some of our other webinars, we also have talked about ambiguous loss. And what that is during this time, lots of people are maybe experiencing these losses or this grief that it's really difficult to name. What is it that I'm grieving over right now? And for a lot of people, it's things like loss of routine or loss of kind of their typical social connections. And so really just noticing that for yourself and trying to label that as something that feels uncertain or ambiguous, and that it is a grief that you're experiencing. Normalizing the ambivalence that you're experiencing right now as well. And so thinking about there are a lot of unknowns still right now, and just normalizing that maybe you feel some uncertainty or ambivalence about that, and normalize that with yourself, that lots of people are experiencing that right now. It can also help, especially with the people that you live with, to kind of share your perspectives, because you might view what's going on right now differently, or the types of kind of safety protocols that are in place, you might understand them differently or have different perspectives about them. So really just trying to have conversations about your thoughts about that, and sharing perspectives, and trying to kind of come to an agreement about that. Being really flexible, creative during this time, as you're finding new ways to connect and be in relationships with other people, as you are figuring out how to engage in maybe the old hobbies that you did that you're not able to do in the same way. Reconstructing routines and rituals. So rituals and routines for a lot of people help them to feel safer. And so thinking about, even if maybe your routine looks different right now, how can you still have a routine at home? What types of rituals can you develop that might help you to restore some of that kind of normalcy? And then connecting to what you find meaning with. So whether that's just expressing what you're grateful for, or connecting to a faith or spiritual community, or spending time in nature, really connecting to those things that you find meaning with. So simple steps for more support. For your children, their school social workers and guidance counselors are great resources. They have a lot of information about different resources, and they can also help to connect you with a Connect program therapist if you feel like your child is needing more support during this time. So if you feel like your child could use more one-to-one support, and a therapist to talk with and process some of the big emotions that are coming up for them during this time, you can talk with your child's school social worker or guidance counselor about the Connect program and that referral process. The Scott County Mental Health Center's number is on there as well. So if you are feeling like you need extra support during this time, they also have therapists that see adults. You can also call your insurance company to ask about other places where you can get therapy as well that are covered. And then Scott County Mental Health Center also has crisis appointments that are available during business hours, so 8 to 4:30 during the weekdays beyond holidays. And so with crisis appointments, if there is a more immediate mental health concern, you can call there and they can try to connect you to someone to assess and kind of recommend next steps. And then the Scott County Mobile Crisis number is on there as well. They are available for kind of that same like crisis assessment and recommendations. And that's anytime, including holidays and weekends and after business hours. And then for any life-threatening concerns, call 911 or bring your child to the ER. Other support that's available is ChangeToChill.org has some cool resources in terms of different kinds of mindfulness strategies that your child can engage in. NAMI Minnesota has lots of great information. They also, I am not sure how they're doing these classes right now, but they will sometimes have different courses in terms of like how to support someone with a mental illness, or just kind of if you're wanting to learn more. So they're a good resource for that. And then the Laker Strong series is something that's available for middle school students right now at either Hidden Oaks or Twin Oaks middle schools. That's Wednesdays at 12 p.m. We just had our first session last week, but it's kind of open to anyone. And students don't need to attend every session. So your child can definitely still sign up. If they're interested, they can talk with their school social worker, guidance counselor to get a permission slip for that. But this is a group if you feel like your child is just kind of needing that extra boost right now. It offers them the opportunity to do things like learn coping with anxiety, positive self-esteem, healthy relationships, and stress management. So if you feel like they could just use that extra boost, you can look into that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the presentation.